Hi, you're listening to Boggy Talk, Faith Conversations in the Mud, a resource of Church on Bayshore. Boggy Talk is recorded on Boggy Bayou in Niceville, Florida, and is hosted by Justin Wyatt and James Ross, pastors at Church on Bayshore. We typically want every matter of faith and life to have crystal clear answers, but it isn't always that easy. This podcast digs in to help Christians think with a kingdom mentality about topics that sometimes get muddy and bog us down. So let's dive in.
Well, hello and welcome to Boggy Talk. Thank you for joining us for the first of two very special editions talking about the Southern Baptist Convention. Riveting, I know.
We just lost 43 people. Right?
Oh, they're like, oh, great. I thought this was
if this were Facebook Live, it would be like,
we'd get some angry faces, angry emojis. But
that's true.
We're so glad you're listening, and we're just going to dive in.
Keep listening.
Please. We got some really great stuff to say. It is like summertime, and when this airs, I'm going to be at camp with our high school and middle schoolers. It's going to be amazing. So please pray. If you're listening to this, please pray for our middle schoolers and high schoolers and for the adults. Yeah. Because we need
Justin
some
gets
supernatural.
Grumpy when he's sleepy.
Man, sleepy, grumpy. If the coffee's bad, like that's going to be hard. So I'm probably going to take some instant. It's going to be bad because
Where's
the camp? That's a great question.
My son's going there.
In Mississippi College, wherever that is.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know where that is.
There's probably a Starbucks nearby if there's a college there.
Yes, I will keep some van
It's a
keys.
Christian college, though, so there might not be like a Starbucks.
It's probably like a knockoff version with a really cheesy like... it's probably like Sunbucks with an S-O-N.
Community cafe.
Yeah, it's got to be bad coffee. That's probably what it is.
Yes.
That's probably what it is. So you just got back from the Southern Baptist Convention, and I think we wanted to share, take this episode and next week to share about the Southern Baptist Convention, what it is, the meeting, what happens, because I think most people don't really know what happens, including many pastors, because not everyone goes. So that's where we're going, and we're going to dive in. So first of all, how was it, man?
Yeah, I think we should start with like this week, kind of what it is, and
that's
what
we're
happened,
doing.
And then maybe next week.
We're going to talk about some issues going forward from it. So first, how was it? Yeah, how was it?
Yeah, it was good. I mean, I think I wasn't going to go this year because it's time, and at our church and my family, that's like I don't have a lot of that. I don't have a lot of money. I have even less time. But just with some issues going on this year, and our church is so invested financially and just historically that I felt like I needed to represent our church. So myself, Sean Walker, who's actually technically still a member of our church, even though he's planting.
We haven't rescinded that membership yet.
Yeah. And then Jeff Waits, who is a longtime member of our church, vice chairman of deacons. We went and it was good. I think. I'll probably start with what it is. Why don't we?
So why don't you explain what is the Southern Baptist Convention?
Yeah, because don't you think that most people literally have no idea?
I think they have no idea. I think they think that the convention is like the denomination, it is. But what is it? It's not all that.
No, it's not. We are not a denomination. A Southern Baptists are not a denomination. We are autonomous churches who cooperate together. Right.
That's the key word, cooperate together.
Yeah, with like-minded churches, like faith. So we all affirm, the Baptist Faith and Message 2000, which is really like a summary of biblical doctrine, some essentials in biblical doctrine. So the Southern Baptist Convention is actually made up of autonomous churches, but most of those churches cooperate with their state convention as well.
Right.
So like when we send our gifts, our cooperative gifts, we send them to our state. Our state is run incredibly well, and 49% are in our state. And I love this. 49% of the funds stay in our state to help with, a lot of different things. I don't need to get into all that. And then the 51% goes to the Southern Baptist Convention, which is more famous, but a lot of the work is really happening
in the state level, the local level.
Yeah. So to cooperate together, I mean, we have a pretty large amount of resources that is given in the several $100 million. So the convention is really only exist for 2 days, and that's these churches sending representatives to vote on things like trustees for the different organizations that we own, and the different, the IMB, International Mission Board, North American Mission Board, and to handle, recommendations and business that might be related to those entities, and they're carrying out the mission that we've assigned them. That's really all it is. It's all these representatives of all these churches getting together to have a say in how things are going.
And when you say entities of the convention, what you mean are like there's the seminaries, right?
Seminaries.
The presidents of the seminary, or not the presidents, but the seminaries. We have North American Mission Board, the International Mission Board, the
ERLC.
ERLC is the right way to say that.
Yeah.
Anyone I'm forgetting?
No. So
Send
yeah,
Relief, that's all part of NAM.
That's part of NAM, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So 3 primary focuses of the Southern Baptist Convention are sending international missionaries, planting and strengthening churches in America, and theological education. And the ERLC is kind of really an extension of the headquarters, if you will. It's not the headquarters, but it kind of branched off from that. And they're really lobbyist, but also education arm of the SBC. Lifeway
yep.
is not funded through the cooperative program, but it is owned by the Southern Baptist Convention.
So explain the executive committee of the Southern Baptist Convention, because if you're saying that really the messengers representing the people are the ones who have the voice and the autonomous vote.
Yeah.
What does the executive committee do?
Yeah, so the executive committee is a representative of the churches. They're people who there's a nominating committee every year, committee on nominations. They nominate people for different roles in working alongside whoever the president is. And the executive committee really work with the full-time employees of the Southern Baptist Convention to kind of handle the business in between the convention. So basically the 363 or 4, depending on the year, days that exist outside those convention, they represent with the authority, and there are parameters on that authority of the convention. And sometimes why it gets maybe heated at the Southern Baptist Convention is a disagreement or confusion about why the executive committee has acted in the way they have over that year.
That did happen this year.
I'm losing some of you.
Yeah, that's right. So we're going to get to some of that, the controversies. That's what everybody wants to know.
That's right.
We're going to get to that in a second. But first, we do want to just say, why are we as a church part of the SBC?
Well, why are you a part of an SBC church?
I am part of an SBC because of tradition. No, just kidding. That is not the reason. I did grow up in an SBC.
Everybody who
church.
knows you knows that's not the reason.
I do believe, the Southern Baptist Convention as a whole does first and foremost look to scriptures as inerrant, as the authority. And personally, that is the number one reason. I do also love the cooperation for missional engagement, church planting and missions in our community, in our area, in our country, and globally. I believe that the way the International Mission Board, the North American Mission Board, in theory, are set up is an incredibly is a great way to send people, to support people, and reach people, and I love that. Those are, I would say, if you had to say top 2 reasons, that'd be it.
Yeah, I mean, so it's hard to say like why we're SBC, because I'm speaking on behalf of all of our members, and there's variations on this. I would say that this isn't true of everyone in our church, but most of the people in our church are here because they do believe in the doctrine of the Baptist faith and message and the general practice of our church. I mean, I love my Methodist friends and my charismatic friends, and but I think they're wrong about a lot of significant Bible stuff, and so I'm not a member of their church. So the alternative for me is really probably be a Baptist or be non-denominational or Bible church. And there's some more.
It's like most non-denominational churches are Baptist.
Yeah.
in their belief and function. Yeah.
Right. But I think so it is a headache sometimes to cooperate with 45,000 other churches.
Right. I mean, it's a headache sometimes to cooperate within a church. So then
I thought you were going to say to cooperate with me.
Yeah. We all have our moments.
I'm gone for a few days and you get salty, but actually usually you're less salty when I'm gone for a few days. But no, I think I'm still convinced that cooperation on some standpoint is good for your soul because it shows a kingdom effort. And in terms of Southern Baptist Convention, I still think what the good we do is worth the negatives that are associated with it. That's really what I would say to simplify that.
Absolutely. So let's talk about this year's convention and what happened. First of all, there was a presidential election for the Southern Baptist Convention, and what this happens every 2 years, or happens every year. Excuse me. Typically, the president who was elected runs again unopposed the next year.
Yes.
And so this past year, J.D. Greer, pastor of Summit Church in North Carolina, was president actually for 3 years because of COVID. Everything was kept in place for an extra year because there wasn't a physical meeting last year. So there was an election this year, and going into the Southern Baptist Convention, the meeting, it was fairly contentious on social media, and there were things going on. So explain the atmosphere there as the presidential election took place.
Yeah, and I'd be curious to hear some of your take on it from social media, because I think that it's different. But yeah, there is every time there's a presidential election, there's more than one person nominated almost every single time. And there's various reasons. There were 4 candidates this year, Randy Adams, Ed Litton, Al Mohler, and Mike Stone. And different people are passionate about those for different reasons. And ultimately, what happened is the 2 highest vote getters, because they didn't get 50% of the vote. You have to have 50% of the vote to win. Ended up having a runoff, and Ed Litton won. So I guess probably, you want to know like what's going on with those guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a group called the Conservative Baptist Network. Cards on the table. I don't agree with their methodology and their approach to a lot of things. I don't necessarily agree with any of their theological beliefs or anything. I mean, disagree, with any of their theological beliefs.
I was about to say, wait.
But they're definitely passionate about this fear that the SBC is going liberal
drift.
And their definition of liberal, I would say, is not very liberal at all. They're very conservative about their definition.
So their definition of liberal is not what most.
Not very
exactly.
Gracious. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, so Ed Litton was called a moderate by New York Times because of a lot of the rhetoric of the Conservative Baptist Network. And I think that he could only be called a moderate in any political theological circle that like ours. Right. What I mean? Like, he is not a moderate. I think ultimately, like, he let his wife teach with him in a sermon series, probably on marriage or something.
It was, yes.
And I've actually done that before, and like, to call that like moderate,
they were attacking him.
Yeah, it's pretty strong. I'm not saying he's right, but I'm saying to say that
he was in violation of Scripture. That was some of the attacks against him.
Yeah. Just so that's that. So when the vote came between the two, it was like 52% to 48%. So what that shows is, at least on what the rhetoric and approach should be, we're kind of divided,
right.
But I don't think hardly anyone, even the group that's passionate about him, we're like, hey, we'll be back next year trying to do this again. Like, they're saying we're not out. We're not right. Pulling out, So I think that's very indicative of how united we are on the ultimate 3 things of theological education, church planting in America, and missions.
I think too that it also shows that it's a lot easier to say things about people online than face to face, because even I watched some of the convention online as I was trying to work and listen, and granted didn't get to see all of it or watch all of it, but what I did see is it was people speaking respectfully to and of each other, which was not the case online and on social, especially on Twitter. And I think there are camps, there are divisions, and there are agendas. This is a convention, not a denomination, a convention made up of men and women who are all sinful, who redeemed by Jesus, but it's like we all bring our issues to
and there's 16 million of us.
Yeah, and so
largest Protestant body in the world.
So and so you're bound to have some issues. Yeah. And I think for me, watching, it's just everybody wants to put labels on people, and and part of it just is, it's so frustrating to me personally, because that's not my personality at all. I'm like kind of a comfortable, like living in with a little bit of ambiguity, and in the, hey, we understand that this is a complicated issue, and there's some people who just push, like, we got to have clarity, and we're going to draw the line so far back that if you disagree at all, you get labeled a liberal. And as you said earlier, just for clarity, when they're calling Ed Litton a liberal, that is not like liberal in the sense of what we would say liberal politically, but it is their interpretation of liberal interpretation of, and it's, even in some of those things, it's just not, I don't think it's fair to say liberal. And yeah, I think,
and we'll get into that next week.
Yeah, watching some of that online though, it was very different. And I think, even watching, you could sense, even removed from the room, removed from the atmosphere and the environment, you can sense that there was, even when there was debate and contentiousness, there was a spirit of unity and a purpose. And I think, if anybody who's been a part of a Baptist church who sat through a business meetings, it's basically kind of like a business meeting with 15,000 people. And
from all over the country.
Yes. And so everyone has different ideas and, but ultimately, if your church is a healthy church, you can disagree, you can air that out, but you're walking away in unity, even if you don't still agree on a decision. You're walking in unity because the purpose is greater, the kingdom of God is greater. And I, not being there, sensed that was the case.
Yeah, I think so.
You were there. Agree? Disagree?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think the drama was overplayed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's sensationalized, by every media outlet and people who and some people, let's just be honest, some leaders feed off of that. The
thing I kept thinking about is like a lot of these pastors like complain about how some of their members can be so nitpicky of them and like critical of them and distrusting. I'm like, well, they're following their leader then. So anyway,
true.
Yeah. So I would say, so that wasn't the only thing on the table. The executive committee always does a report and has their recommendations, and I'll just kind of put this all together.
Yes.
And then also the resolutions committee has resolutions, and those are two different things. Recommendations are binding things for the entity that they affect, or the executive committee, or how the Southern Baptist Convention itself is going to operate, in the interim, the administration. And then resolutions are really not binding. They're just like statements saying this convention, this body of messengers affirms whatever this might be. And I mean, the big issues were, there's concern about how sexual abuse has been handled, that by the executive committee, by the staff of the convention, even directly right now. And so there's going to be an investigation into it. A third party is going to investigate with a task force that's set up of representatives. And I don't know what I think about that. I mean, I have, my inclinations, but those are not fruitful for this discussion. But I think that, enough people are questioning that there should be an investigation.
Absolutely.
And then, there was an affirmation of a statement made basically, that we reject systemic racism, but we don't, and any theory, we reject any theory also that teaches, counter to the gospel. And a lot of people wanted them to say critical race theory particular. I'm not joking when I would say a third of the questions asked were about critical race theory.
I'm sure. Even listening, I was like, another one. There's another one.
I actually at one point said, can I make a motion that no one is allowed to talk about that anymore? Because it was the same thing over and over again. And it's too nuanced to hash out in that quick, interaction.
Right. And that's not the forum to hash that out. And then you have people who think they know what it is, who it's not what they think it is, and the people who do know what it is, and people who know what it is would say, we can't hash this out right now. Yeah.
And what Willie Rice talked about, I mean, several people talked about this. What most Southern Baptist pastors and I believe Southern Baptists believe, let me rephrase that. Most of the people who are talking believe that critical race theory is flawed.
Right.
It cannot be followed. It should not be adhered to. There are major issues with it. However, our rhetoric about it as a denomination largely made up, or at least appearing to largely be made up of white people who have a history of racism, not me, but like our denomination was founded partly because of racism and slavery, need to be clear that they do see systemic racism and as something that has existed since the beginning of time.
Right.
And so in our rhetoric, we have to be careful with what we're saying. This is part of why I wasn't in favor of Mike Stone, being the president. I have nothing. I don't know him personally, anything like that. Right. It's just whoever the president of the SBC is a spokesman for the SBC.
Right.
And New York Times was there. CNN is there. I mean, they're
this
listening.
This is a big deal. Yes.
We are a huge group of influential people cooperating together who have a huge influence on what happens in our country. I mean, it's just reality.
Just true. Yeah.
And so I'm very concerned with how we're communicating to the world.
Right. And you believe that Ed Litton was the best person for that.
I do. I like Al Mohler,
yeah.
But I just think because he's an SBC entity head,
yeah.
And he's president of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, that's conflict of interest,
right.
That would take him away from his duties. And he's pretty openly Calvinistic, and while I think there's a big room for Calvinist and non-Calvinist in our church and in any church, as long as we don't become obsessed about those things, I do think it could be more polarizing if he was the president. So I thought Ed Litton was the best choice. Randy Adams, his approach is just not good. He might be right that there's corruption in NAM. I mean, I don't necessarily think that, but he could be right. I don't know. Yeah. I'm not that involved, but his approach was pretty poor. So
yeah, I know nothing about him. So no comment. Yeah. We talked about recommendations and resolutions. Anything else to speak on those before we move on to celebrations?
Nah.
So walking.
I mean, if this were the convention, we would talk about it for a lot more.
So I think this is important because it's not just business. It's not just resolutions. There are reports given about what God is doing in and through Southern Baptists and their entities. So as a pastor who attended, you come back, if you were to say, hey, church, here's 5 things or 10 things. Here's things to celebrate walking away from the Southern Baptist Convention. What would you say?
Number one is that we continue to send missionaries overseas. And even in COVID, during a very difficult time, and that God is calling those people out of their churches. One guy said he was going to work for NASA, gave up his dream job. Like, that's just so awesome. Yeah. And really being a minister in America has its struggles, but they're giving up so much for the gospel, and we get to do that together. We have about 4,000 missionaries overseas. And so that would be number one. Number two is just the increasing diversity.
Yeah.
I mean, which is reflective of our country, in spite of our history, as SBC, it is being reclaimed, and a lot of that's coming through church planting and in the cities. So I would say those things. Number 3 is the unity. I mean, that around those things, are certainly a big deal. Number 4, I think, is just the model of leadership by J.D. Greer, by James Merritt. Just there's a lot of guys who have had this platform in the SBC and beyond, and they've just led well. And then I don't know. You do number 5.
I would just say, from what I saw, I think there is. I'm encouraged because there's people older than us in ministry, pastors older than us, there's pastors younger than us, and I personally am encouraged to see pastors younger than us care deeply and passionately about the gospel, about doctrine, but not elevating that above. This sounds weird, but not elevating the doctrine above the mission, and saying that everyone has to agree with exactly my interpretation of everything, and we can't cooperate. And I sense that just listening to some of the messengers.
Not elevating a secondary doctrine.
Right, that's what I mean. Yes, not orthodoxy doctrine. Exactly. But I think that's exciting because you're constantly looking behind you, saying how am I leading, and how is this impacting people behind me? And I do sense that there's a lot of good leadership going on, and people are asking good questions, wrestling with good issues, and wanting to do the best they can to lead well. And I think that's exciting. I think, you hit on missions. I think that's, that's the biggest deal to me, you know, and I think if we lose sight of that, and I think we're focusing more and more on that, that's a good thing.
So it was interesting because the same day, like right within, I think I was sitting in the IMB sending celebration, and these 64 people are going out overseas. And right before that, you had put, or whoever had posted the picture of our kids that went out to Center Kid. And I'm going to get emotional. And I was like, what if one of these kids are going to be here one day,
right.
you know, because the investment we're making in a local church, and then together we cooperate and give them these opportunities. And I was just like, I mean, what a annoying, frustrating, belaboring, exhausting work we are doing in the local church and as local churches working together, but how worth it is.
It is, absolutely. That was, just watching that and watching, I think a younger me was like, I want a big platform. And watching what I got to see of the convention, it was just like, I'm just so thankful to be plugged in.
I know. Serving
in the local church, like not worrying about a big platform, not worrying about followers of me, but like, hey, what do we do to press our church to love Jesus well, to love this community well, to love the nations well, to pursue making him known. And that's what it's about, you know, and that's hopefully the heart of everyone in our church, not just leadership, but that's where we want to go as a church, is saying, like you said, it's worth it.
And give your life to that. If you're not, give your life to that. Let's work together to give your life to that. And you're going to make me mad and I'm going to make you mad. But Jesus is so good.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes and amen. He is not a part of life. He is life. He's worth it. He's worth it all. That wraps up kind of just a nutshell of some of what happened. So next week, we are going to talk about some of the challenges coming out of the convention and some of the challenges moving forward facing the Southern Baptist Convention. You'll be sure that's like the juicy stuff that everybody's like, well, tell me the difficult stuff. Well, we will. But if you have any questions, if you want to know more about the convention, you can send us a message, email James. He'll be happy to just explain more. He loves talking about this all day long. No, but really, he loves the church. You love the church. Because of that.
And if it helps you be more engaged, I'm all in.
Absolutely. So thanks so much for joining us. Be sure and tune in next week as we talk about the issues facing the SBC moving forward. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next.
Thanks for listening to Boggy Talk. We are so glad you joined in the conversation. Go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss a beat.